Ready as
Hello and welcome to my show, The Awakening, here on WGSN-DB, the Going Bold and Going Solo Network. The information and opinions expressed on this show are just that, the opinions of the individual speaking based on their individual personal experiences. They are not intended to diagnose and do not constitute professional advice or recommendations. So, you know that pain and the stress and the struggle that divorcing men and women go through. Well, there is a way to find peace, keep your sanity, all while helping your lawyer prep for your case, saving you thousands of dollars in the process. My name is Tina Huggins. I'm your divorce coach specialist, divorce planning specialist, restorative family mediator, and conflictual co-parenting coach. And joining me here today is Anissa Hudak. And Anissa is guiding traumatized women in their pursuit of their healing. Anissa's specialty, or where she is and where she's drawn to, is in the biggest serious arena, sexual trauma. So the aspect of sexual trauma has been a major topic for quite some time. And in my work recently, it's been the biggest topic. So I want to welcome Anissa, and we can kind of delve into this together. So thank you for being here, Anissa.
Well, thank you for having me. It's wonderful to be here.
Yeah, as I kind of like bounced all over them words there as I was trying to introduce you. So
It's all good.
like I kind of said, this week has been kind of a difficult week for me in the work that I do because I work as a family mediator, not in divorce, but trying to keep families together. And we have this young girl that attempted suicide here in the last few days. And it's all because of the sexual trauma that's in the background. And not that I even know what's going on with her, but it's all very much related to stuff that I've gone through back when I was her age. Actually, mine was even before age 16. Mine started at age 9. So there's so much of that. And I mean, I talk about that one specific situation, but there's so much of that that's been on my plate for the last 3 weeks or so. So I'm so glad that you're here so we can kind of talk about some of this.
Yeah, absolutely.
So how did you get involved with this?
Well, I am very much like the women that I work with. I am a 2-time rape survivor. And I really sat down and thought about, what do I feel like I need? And what isn't available to me? Okay, so go out and create it. Because I can't be the only woman who has this need.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's kind of how I fell into this.
Yeah, and I can tell you, there was some molestation that happened when I was 9, and pretty much so either physically or emotionally or verbally kept up until I was about 16. But that did never leave me, not even after 16. I don't think that actually left me like I could just drop it and walk away until probably 10 years ago. And so I held on to that for close to 50 years because of all of the stuff that goes on with everything. And being able to drop it and walk away was just huge. And I kind of did that because just like you, I felt there was women who needed this information. So I put it on Facebook, not naming names, because the people that were involved back then, there's a whole lot that goes on, in the background that even we don't know about. And I don't consider the people that are in my life back then to be perpetrators then nor now. But I had a hard time handling that for the longest time.
It's not easy by any stretch of the imagination. And the thing is, women like us need to understand that they don't have to carry it, that life is actually better on the other side when they're not. It doesn't have to define them. It doesn't have to plague them. It doesn't have to ruin their lives. It doesn't have to run their lives. That there is a way of being able to walk away from it and be done processing it. And it doesn't have to be with them for the rest of their lives in a very upfront manner.
Mm-hmm. And I think that I can definitely say that all of that has made me stronger. And I can tell you, those people in the back of my life back there made me a fifth-degree black belt. So I thank them for pushing me that hard that I worked hard enough to get into that seat.
It certainly does, color who you become. However, it doesn't have to define you.
Mm-mm. And I so agree with that, you know, it, when it stopped at age 16 is because I basically stood up. And the reality is right then one of those boys was in my martial arts class and I beat him 5-zip, just waffled him. He quit the next day and never came back to class. So I had that part for me. And what it did though is during that time frame from 16 until I was probably somewhere about 45, I would say, I would place myself at least 40. I would place myself in situations that were sexually unsafe. And not so much as I got older, but it would be relationships where it didn't feel right to have sex with this individual, but because of the situation, I went ahead because we were boyfriend and girlfriend or whatever that might have looked like. Or in one case, I was about 15 and I was at a martial arts event and I was walking by the room of one of the instructors, mind you, and he pulled me in and crawled on top of me. Now, we were clothed and nothing happened. I was out of the room in probably about a 5-minute time frame, but just that alone is enough to make you sick to your stomach.
Well, and there's two things that go with that. One is boundaries. Because our boundaries have been completely blown past,
Mhm.
we have a hard time building and creating and maintaining boundaries because we don't know where that boundary line is. It's already been crossed. So we have a hard time with that. So that's one. The second reason being we have a hard time really trusting our guts. We think that it failed us once and it didn't. We, in some way, shape, or form, kind of knew something was wrong, something was up, something wasn't right. And yet we didn't listen to that little voice inside that said, you shouldn't do this, whatever it is. And because we didn't listen to that voice, now we don't trust it. And so there's a book out there. It's called The Gift of Fear by Gavin DeBecker. And that is a book every woman should read. Ages 16 and up, every woman should read that book because it talks about listening to that little voice, how our brain, we actually see things that prior to them happening. And we kind of know, however, as women, we've also been conditioned to think, oh, that's not going to happen. People are good. People are nice. People aren't going to be mean. No, don't listen to that little voice. You have to give everybody way more benefit of the doubt than anybody else, than men should. We are conditioned as women to think this. And that's not right. And it's not true. It's lying. That voice is lying. So there's a lot that goes into that.
I think there's a lot, that goes into everything. I was raised on a farm and I was, my dad didn't want me to date out of my race. So, and I was seeing a Spanish boy. In fact, probably one of the best guys I ever dated. He treated me great. He treated my family proper, respectful. But my dad didn't want that. So, yeah, I'm still involved with this verbal molestation in the background or whatever that looked like at the time. But age 13, my dad gave me the okay to date this older guy. Well, and I can't say that the Spanish kid was not older. They were probably fairly close to the same age, actually. So there was probably, I don't know, 6, 8 years difference between me. So he was 22 when I started dating him. And and my dad would let me go spend weekends with him. And I look back on that, and of course, I would never have done that if I had daughters. That's just something I wouldn't have done. I was lucky that the boy I stayed with was a good guy and that his brother was married to an amazing woman. So really, when I went to spend the weekends, I was spending them with her, and we were just building me up, basically. If I look back, that's what she was doing, is helping make me strong and make me make better choices as I aged.
Isn't it amazing that you had that woman in your life who was looking out for you? There's so many women out there who don't have that.
Mm-hmm.
So thankfully you had her.
Mm-hmm. And then we are dealing with the sex trafficking stuff. I would work out with a police officer in Arkansas, and we talked about how he was involved in trying to stop a sex trafficking situation from going on, and they couldn't do anything until they crossed the state line. And it just seems like there's so much. I was sitting here texting with clients a minute ago trying to help them through their situation. And when we have law enforcement and courts and counties involved in our lives, our timeline is based on their ability to do their work, but the rules are not there to protect us.
Oh, absolutely not. By no means. And it's always he said, she said.
Mm-hmm.
And generally the guy's word carries more weight because we are second class citizens, even in this country today. I mean, we are second class citizens. So, and I think that's sometimes even being generous. So yeah, there are some law enforcement out there that are really good people
Mm-hmm.
and do the work, and then there's others who are like, whatever. Um, right now here in America, rape DNA kits are at a 5-year backlog of being processed.
Wow.
So that means that they're sitting on shelves and they are degrading. The
Mm-hmm.
perpetrator's walking around, and that woman or whomever, because it can be a man, is walking around. They have no closure.
Right.
That just extends this healing curve even longer. That's wrong on so many levels.
So many levels, so many levels. And I knew it was backlogged. I had heard that. And, to go back on your statement about good cops versus bad cops, I think for the majority, cops get into their field because they want to protect and make a difference. And then the laws just get in the way. I know I worked in law enforcement, and one of the things that I tell my clients, I'm like, you've got to report this to the police officers every time, and I'm talking, right now about a fence. I have a client who's got problems with their neighbor. My son's got problems with his neighbor, and that's the fact. You have to make contact with the police every time for a period of time so that you can get them to make a report. And I know that seems like it's just a waste of time, But the way that I kind of explain that is, since I've worked with law enforcement, I say the first time they come out there, tell them exactly what you're trying to do is you're trying to build a case file so you can take this to court. And you're going to call every time that this happens. They don't have to come out at the house then. Now they can take the report over the phone. So you've taken that, oh my God, I don't want to go out there again, away from the cop, where he'll go, okay, just kind of tell me what's going on and I'll write this all down and it's done. And so that's a way to handle that. And if we're dealing with domestic abuse, I say that when you call those cops, you'd better not call 911 unless you're willing to press charges against the other person. Because don't waste your time, and dang sure don't waste that cop's time, because if you don't press those charges right now, when you call that cop, the next time could be very dangerous. And because the cop's already been over there 3 or 4 times, they're going to procrastinate on going. I know. I sat in the cars with them when they would procrastinate. Oh my gosh, there she is. She's calling again. She never presses charges. I don't know why we even go over there. And then it's too late.
Yeah, it's a real problem. It really is.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, I feel bad for the law enforcement agencies because they see a lot. I mean, they usually see people on their very worst days, and they see a lot, and they get jaded. And, you know, it's not their fault. However, when we need help, we need help.
Yeah.
And it shouldn't be hinging upon whether they, you know, charges get pressed or not, unfortunately. If you feel like you're in dire need and you need to call the police, then you should be able to do that and not second guess it.
Right. And that's the whole thing. And so that brings us into our calling the cops. Don't call woof. So if you're going to call them, do something with the call, or don't call until you need them there, because their job is not to slap your spouse's fingers and say, stop doing that, because you know that's not going to work. And in fact, I see it very often in my work where that just causes the next fight to be way worse.
Yes. Most times that does. Yes.
Mm-hmm. So in your work, Anissa, how do you, I mean, first off, when a woman comes to you, they come to you and they've got, you know, this part of their life they need to heal. What's the first thing that you kind of start digging into to help them heal?
I don't want to hear about it. And I know that sounds counterintuitive. I don't want them to have to replay that movie in their head. I don't want them to reprint that on their brain or in their body. And so it's not that I don't want to hear about it. I don't want them to have to relive it one more time. What I do is very different than talk therapy. Both different modalities that I utilize, very different than talk therapy. I don't want them to talk about it. They can share details with me. I'm totally cool with that. I mean, and if somebody feels very called to tell me their story, I will listen. However, I would prefer them not to have to talk about it, relive it anymore. With the yoga therapy, we want to get women on a mat, getting them moving, getting that trauma out of their body, because the body stores the trauma on a very cellular level. We got to get it out of there.
Yeah. And here, hold on just a second. Sorry about that. We have young neighbors that just came through the house. So one of the things that I know with yoga and everything is the hips hold a lot of memories. And so I know when I'm working on things that the hips are one of the most important things for me to stretch through.
Absolutely. There are muscles contained within the hips. They're called the hip flexors. We call them the psoas muscle. And it is the emotional warehouse of your body. So everything gets stored there. Your happiness, your joy, your frustration, your anger, your fear, everything that you feel is held there. Now, that's within the hips. The psoas trail, as we call it, actually starts right behind the knee, and it goes into the inner thigh, goes up the inner thigh. Then you have the actual hip flexors. The hip flexors actually then go into the back up to the spine and all the way up to the base of the neck where the spine meets the skull. So yes, the hips are very important. Yes, we do a lot of hip openers in this yoga therapy that we do. However, we also move the entire body because we want to work that whole psoas trail. And so you get a full body workout. However, we do focus, a lot of time on the hip openers to stretch out that psoas and really get it to release a lot of the baggage that you're carrying.
Yeah, I was a martial artist, like I said earlier. And of course, I did a lot of swing kicks where my leg was definitely opening up the hip flexors. And then, of course, our work in our upper body would rotate the spine some and rotate the hips as well, using the glutes and those thighs, as you mentioned. And I know that that played a huge role in how well I was able to move through my life emotionally because I was always active. I was either running or working out with my students or working out with my instructors. So it was a huge deal for me.
Oh, absolutely. And, obviously, I love yoga therapy. I'll tell you, it's the best thing since sliced bread. However, a lot of people don't like yoga, and that's cool. This yoga therapy is very different than what you would get down at your corner yoga studio. However, if yoga just isn't your jam, that's totally cool. Find something that does work then. Could be running, it could be hiking, it could be martial arts, qigong. It doesn't matter. Bicycling, very nice. Bicycling. Um, it could be whatever kickboxing, whatever you need it to be. It doesn't matter what the modality is. If you are moving those hips, opening them up, doing the hip openers, that's all that matters. And so find something that works for you. However, I'm biased. I think the best is the yoga therapy. But, that's my last plug. What can I say?
Well, the funny thing is that I would have people ask because I have a exercise background as well. And so I've had people ask, so what's the best exercise? And I will tell them yoga, because to me, yoga can get your temperature rise. I mean, it gets your heart rate going. It strengthens and stretches the muscles, tendons, ligaments, bones. And it is, to me, the all-around best and safest workout that's available for both men and women.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And then to be able to do this for a very specific group of people who have, a goal in sight. There is all different types of yoga therapy. There's for cardiac rehab, for cancer, MS, you name it. There's all different types of yoga therapy. And all we do is specialize working with people who want to attain some sort of a goal. I am specifically trained to work with PTSD and traumatic brain injuries. And so I'm helping those folks literally get the trauma out of their bodies. And that's the beauty of it. And so by doing that, we give people the opportunity to have a bigger bandwidth, to be able to deal with stress in a very healthy manner, because they know, gosh, I'm feeling those hips, they're tight again. I got to get on my mat.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful thing.
As you talk about trauma and PTSD, so in one of the cases that I've worked fairly recently, I happened, and this was like connecting the dots with this PTSD, because I've dealt with PTSD And then there's something else that I've seen actually happen where, and lack of a proper term for it, but it was rage. And I saw the person go through at first. When I saw this happen or heard about it, there was alcohol involved. I saw the pictures, I saw what the rage this individual did, breaking all the glass in the house and just trashing things. The windshield of the car got cracked because they were just having a rage fit. And then, I don't know, months later, I saw it from a distance, the same person go through this rage fit. This time there was no alcohol involved. And so he is a vet, and he had had his knee blown off, and something triggered him that day to the point that he actually ended up in trouble with the law. And then fast forward, I happened to see a case or hear a case where this young girl had a basic rage fit and beat the crap out of her mom. And so in listening to the stories, I was able to connect that. So the reason why I bring those stories up is that the work that you're doing, although, and I think is important in the fact, you're not necessarily making them relive that, but you're working with the neural connectors, the muscles and the tendons, ligaments, so that this can all be dealt with in a safer way.
Wholeheartedly. And so that's half of what my practice is the yoga therapy, and really enabling people to work through and move through that anger, rage, and wrath. Wrath is huge, especially amongst our ladies in our group. We do a lot of wrathing, and a lot of people don't know what that really means. And wrath is when you're so angry, you make people pay. Usually we make ourselves pay. And that's generally what we do. We take it out on ourselves. Wrath. And so that's one side of my practice. The other side of my practice is neuro side. Again, women don't talk about it. We actually help them move trauma out of their unconscious. When they go to talk therapy, they're talking from their conscious mind. Now, you're only in your conscious mind 5% of your day. So how can you possibly solve anything from a place where you're only there 5% of your time? The unconscious is actually where we store trauma. And so there is a way, again, without having to talk about it, that you can actually allow your unconscious to process events, situations, and literally be able to move on and be done with it. And it's brilliant. It is easy and effortless. It is powerful, effective, and actually very quickly done. So those are the two aspects of my business, of what I do and what I'm able to help women do. Rage comes into both parts. Not only, does it help on the mat to work through it and kind of get it out of the body, but then there is this other component of really seeing the rage for what it is. And rage is actually disappointment, sadness, grief. It's just masked in a very different way. And it's really from not being heard. That is a huge part of it, not being heard. And then the wrathing, and being able to help someone really identify what is wrathing, what are they doing to themselves or others. Generally, though, it's mostly to ourselves. And how to stop it. Stop it. When we learn to stop it, then life changes. When we are able to recognize that within ourselves and we stop doing that to ourselves, a lot of the healing really starts to happen.
And I can understand that. You know, I don't know whether I talked to you about this, but I'm actually certified as a mind body worker. So mind body medicine, and I'm a master in, that means that I worked under my instructor for 10 years. And that, you know, I tell people all the time, if you don't get it out, it's going to store in your body. And in mind body medicine, the hips are our movement of our body. But on the other side of those hip flexors is the lower part of the spine and into the bottom of that, which is our glutes next, right? And that's where the shit of our life gets stored, and it's manifested there. And so if you have looked at people who are walking around, older people that are all hunched over, it's because they never dealt with their issues and they piled on their body and started messing with their tendons and ligaments. And if they would do physical activity and deal with those issues, then that's not going to be stored. It won't cause cancer. It won't cause a stroke later.
Absolutely. You know, it's horrible that we've had to go through what we've been through. Then when you start to couple that with physical ailments that accompany the PTSD. You know, PTSD is a very hard thing to actually diagnose. There are over 75 different symptoms that come into play. And some of them are physical, some of them are emotional, some are mental. And so it really takes a practitioner, whoever that might be, whether it's a nurse or a doctor or a psychologist, psychiatrist, whomever, to really look at the whole person and say, okay, you've got IBS, you know, you've got this going on, you've got that going on. It's kind of like a Chinese food menu, you know? And when they look at the whole person, then they're able to really make a diagnosis that, yes, this person has PTSD. When that occurs, and because of the cortisol levels are so high for those of us dealing with PTSD, we run the risk of having a lot of different physical ailments. For instance, I was not even 45 and I was diagnosed with diabetes. Now, does it run in my family? Yes. Was I going to get it? At some point, yes. Before the age of 45? No, I didn't need it then. I could have waited till I was in, you know, late 50s, early 60s or what have you. That was far too early to be diagnosed with something like that. However, because of my cortisol levels and adrenal fatigue and everything else that was happening, yeah, that's how it showed up. Generally, it is some sort of an autoimmune, you know, disease or efficiency or something that happens. However, it could be so many other things. And that's the problem, is that, you know, if you are not dealing with this in a proper way, you're going to pay, you know, and your body will scream to get its needs met somehow, some way. Everyone is afraid of going there, reliving it.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of that has to do with the fact that the way the memory is stored. And when people realize that it actually wasn't quite as bad as what they think happened, it's very interesting to have, you know, to see that. So what do I mean? If you were to think of your brain as having filing cabinets, and of course we're recording in real time. I mean, this is always happening. Our brain is the fastest computer on the face of the earth. So as something is occurring, we are recording this in our memory banks. And what happens is that all of the visual is taken out and put into one filing cabinet. All of the audio is taken out and put into a different filing cabinet. So all of the senses are taken out, put into all different filing cabinets. When you go to recall the memory, all of those parts and pieces come back together. However, when we have PTSD and trauma on board and all that kind of stuff, sometimes those bits and pieces get put in the wrong filing cabinets and they don't come back together the way they should. Now, the brain doesn't like an incomplete memory. And so it'll say, oh, I got you. I'll put a part in. Generally, it's not anything positive because we're not wired like that. And you can thank the cavemen for that. And so the memory is actually not quite as real as we think it is. Is that wrong? No, it's your brain trying to protect you. You know, it's trying to help you out. So a lot of people deal with things like that. And then when they sit back and they really are able to get into what happened and they realize, gosh, it wasn't really quite as bad. Or, you know, maybe it was really quite as bad. However, facing it isn't as hard as they thought it was. And being able to deal with it and move on with it. And that does not require them to have to talk about it. In fact, they don't have to go there. They don't have to relive it in order to process it, which is the beauty of what I do.
And I think that's a good thing. I struggle, have struggled with having to go to a therapist because I'm not the type of person. I'm like, why do we have to keep digging? We've already met bedrock. Let's start building on the bedrock, right? And I've struggled in the past with the therapist just digging and digging, and it's just not a pleasant experience. And then I work with people who also have had the same kind of issues. And so I refer them to people like you, people, you know, there's this one gal that does something completely different, and just one conversation is the equivalent to like 3 to 5 months of therapy just because connecting dots. And then I have, you know, lost my husband a year ago, and I've done RTT therapy, which is basically going through and reprogramming myself through hypnosis type work. And all these therapies are available. And so many of them, like, who would think that yoga is something that is a therapy that can help you emotionally?
Many people don't realize it. And, you know, and that's why I got into the neuro work that I do, is that I was with women who were like us on our mats, and they kept coming up to me and saying, hey, you know, I feel great after class. And then I go into talk therapy and I feel like crap again. And I agreed because I was doing the same thing, because everybody says, what do? You have a problem, you go into talk therapy, right? And talk therapy is great. It is the, you know, like that's the first stop. It brings you into awareness. However, a lot of talk therapy practitioners don't have the tools to help you beyond that. And that's kind of where the disconnect is. So, you know, there's many different parts to a person. You have the physical body. You have the conscious brain. That's where talk therapy comes from, conscious brain. There's also the unconscious, and that's where it's stored. You know, the unconscious brain is in control, and we don't like to think that, because we want to think that, you know, consciously we are in control. Right. I got a news flash for everybody. That is not what happens. Your unconscious is what rules the roost. And what do I mean by that? So when you're sleeping, who keeps you alive? Who tells you it's time to blink, breathe, go to the bathroom? All of that is your unconscious. Your unconscious runs everything. It is literally the CEO of your body, your brain, your mind. And so we also have to address that as well. And so, yes, talk therapy is great. That is your first stop. You stop there, you get the awareness, and then you have to go into the unconscious. And we need to get it out of there. We need to allow the unconscious to process what occurred. That can
Right.
happen in a very short amount of time. It only takes about 30 days.
Awesome. Yeah, I was reading that on your page here that it only takes about that, and you can see all the countries that work in and everything, and all of that. And as we start to come to a close, which I don't want to stop this conversation because this is a serious and very important conversation for people who just don't realize how much of that stuff is buried inside, and to work through the conscious to get to the subconscious is very difficult. And sometimes, like in my case, it doesn't work that way. I have to do something else. So can you kind of tell us how people can get a hold of you?
Well, I'm kind of like a bad penny. I just keep showing up all over. Um, I'm on, all the regular socials, Insta, Facebook. I'm not on TikTok. I'm not that groovy. I am on LinkedIn, but I'm a social media dinosaur. What can I tell you? Um, I have a website, obviously. There are some, there's obvious ways to get in touch with me. I am around. I do answer my phone. But yeah, I go to my website, which is phoenixwomenhealing.com. And I'm all over the place. You can find me on all the socials at, Phoenix Women Healing.
And as you can see here for our viewers, you can make an appointment with her right here from her QR code, which is very cool. So for those of you who don't know who I am, I'm a certified divorce coach, meaning that I've been trained in the complexities divorce. I've also lived through it. I've lived through abuse, broken hands, separated ribs, dislocated leg. I've also watched my father pulled him out of the hospital, and my late husband. He was tortured psychologically. I mean, you name it. He's gone through that. So not only have I been trained in the complexities, I've lived through the difficulties. So I understand what high conflict divorce is, especially that with abuse. And you can reach me through my email at coachtinalyn@gmail.com. That's CoachTinaLYNN at gmail. My website is divorcecoachspecialist.com. And you can find me on social media, Tina Lynn Huggins on Facebook. That's Huggins. LinkedIn, Tina Huggins. Instagram, Divorce Coach Tina Lynn. And TikTok under Divorce Tina. So I know you said you weren't on there and that you're not groovy. Well, I don't know that I'm very groovy either, but I'm on there anyway. So Anissa, can you kind of give our viewers a last little bit of advice?
Deal with it. Take action. Words are important, but action trumps words every day. Take action. Do it. It's not as bad as you think it's going to be. And life is so much better on the other side. So much better. And that is what my wish for every woman who hears this, and man. It's so much better on the other side. It really is. So don't delay. Go do it.
Yes. And so I'm going to back up on, we keep saying and men and men. So we women, we keep things to ourselves when it comes to that. But you can imagine if we're keeping that kind of stuff to ourselves, that men really keep that stuff to themselves. So my little bit of advice is for you all, but directing it at men is that this is an easy way for you to go through and start working through that. It will release, and I'm sure that Anissa would tell you sometimes you'll even feel like crying or cry in the middle of some of those sessions just because it releases. And when I would have people on my massage table, we would end up with tears often because I was working in the hips and psoas muscles, releasing those types of things. So, so just so that you know, as we move through this and you need to have the police officers there at your home, you want to make sure that you call them at 911 and get them there. And if you're in the Netherlands, it's 999. And if you're in the UK, it's 112. And luckily, Canada and the US kind of share the same 911. So get the police officers there, press charges. Don't drop those charges. The moment you drop those charges is a time when things can go worse. Oftentimes, once the charges are dropped, you are dealing with worse abuse on the other side of dropping those charges than you did beforehand. So make sure that that's your key out and that you work through that to get out of the relationship. And then if you're dealing with domestic violence, you can call the domestic violence hotline at 800-799-7233. That number again is 800-799-7233. And a lot of people going through divorce and dealing with sexual abuse and things like this, we deal with suicidal ideations. And I don't ever want you to be there. And when you get there, if you get there, you need to call the suicide prevention hotline. Both Canada and the US have the number as 988. Talk to that person. Let that person talk you off that ledge. That's what you need right at that moment, is somebody who can help talk you off of that ledge. You can also reach that in the Netherlands at 113. Let them be there for you and help talk you off the ledge. I want to thank you very much for being here with me today, Anissa.
Thank you so very much for having me. I had a great time chatting with you. I think we could chat about this for hours, unfortunately. Fortunately. But I really appreciate being here. Thank you so very much.
Thank you so much. And I just ask that everybody please pay attention, and you can schedule yourself with Anissa right here on her QR code and get a chance to talk with her and see what she has to offer. And again, thank you, Anissa, for being here with me today.
Thanks again. I appreciate it.